Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this edition of the CEOMastermind.AI podcast. I am super excited about this conversation today we're about to have with Armin. If you're driving right now, I'd actually encourage you to make sure you sit down for this one. I think this one here is, yes, Armin can talk about how to close. Yes, Armin can talk about how to set up a perfect business. What we're going to talk about today is much, much greater, much stronger than that. It's in the spiritual realm, something that's often ignored, but is critically important. And as those of you on my podcast know that I always talk about strategy, structure, and people, and all about how to design happy teams, happy businesses, something that you'd like, something that you want to run. And so Armin here has got incredible experience, life experience for a young fellow, incredible stories. He was the vice president of Think and Grow Rich Institute. Everyone knows that organization. He's the founder of HighTicketCoaching.com. It's how I initially met Armin many, many years ago. And to the most recently establishing what is a seemingly perfect business, School of Influence. Now, Armin has guided hundreds of entrepreneurs to break through their limitation, kind of realign with their purpose, redefine what success looks like. We talk about what does hard look like, and we get into this. He talks about these philosophies. We're going to talk about the philosophy of surrendering, this concept of pursuit of peace over happiness. There's a few topics we're going to go through. Armin and I were talking just before this, and we're just going to let's see how this goes. But just let you know, this is a conversation that you want to sit down for. You want to really be present for this. It's not something that you do that I often do. I listen to podcasts, and I'm in Canada, shovel the snow. This is something you want to actually think about and not just casually consume. Some of the questions we'll cover in topics is surrender as strength. How do you go from control to peace? How do we define success? This concept of goals to being. What does that mean? We've talked about it on the podcast before about burnout. We talk about that business systems and people, but what about founders and leaders and your own life, your own spiritual existence? The ego versus the soul dynamic, peace is power, superpower, all these sorts of things. Armin and I were joking, we're probably going to need another podcast after this. So as always, we're going to try to cap this to 40 to 50 minutes. Sometimes we go over time. We really don't want to lose a train of thought. But Armin, thank you so much for joining this podcast. Absolutely honored to be talking to you. Your story is one of inspiration and one that will transform more lives than what you were doing before, because I think there's such rich learning ground. Welcome to the CEOMasterMind.Ai Podcast.
I'm honored to be here, and we had a whole podcast episode right before this just from talking. So hopefully the conversation will help free a lot of minds, shed light over darkness and shadows, and bring some sense of truth and remembering in everyone listening who they are.
For the audience, I know you a little bit. I've been in your world. I know people that, when you're high ticket coaching, you're on the stage with the shield at, Funnel Hacking Live and all these typical. Can you give us just a few minute journey of, sort of where you were 10 years ago? And,
Yeah.
kind of some of the quick peaks and valleys you've been through, and then we'll get right into the surrendering as a strength concept.
Yeah, well, the shortest version, I'm really gonna challenge myself on this. It started with transformation seminars. That happened for 3 years, and I thought I was gonna be Tony Robbins, and I really believed my mind had really convinced me I'm gonna succeed him, and that was the ultimate dream. I did that. I went at it, and I did fulfill a lot of my dreams. And I got to experience the closest feeling to that dream, being on stage with hundreds of people in a room, banging my chest and, speaking like Tony. And I really thought like, wow, you put your mind to something, you can make it happen. After that, COVID hit. And so at that time, I was getting very tempted with how to make more money in the business because I was living my dream. I was enjoying it, but we didn't have really much profits. I didn't know how to run a real business or do finances. So I saw some people that didn't look any smarter than me making a lot of ridiculous money online. So again, my mind did what it does perfectly. It convinced me that maybe doing an online business will be the key to all my answers, the answer to all my questions, and will make me happy. So I got really good at that online thing. And for another 3 years after that, I built this business. And whereas the event business, I never made over a million. Cumulatively, I made close to it, about 800 grand or so. But in my online business, we made millions. We generated millions. We had 400 clients, I think, in total over the 2 years or so that we ran that program. We made some millionaires, which is cool. People that weren't a millionaire, we worked with them, and now, they crossed their millions. And so one of them, actually, two of them now have cost officially 1 million a month, which is kind of cool. They still
Amazing.
message me even now from years ago. I'm so detached from that world that they still message me, "Hey man, thanks again so much. Here's our numbers now." I had two people in the last 30 days message me and be like, "We just crossed our first 100 grand month." And it's so interesting to me that I still get these kind of messages and I just don't care about that entire life anymore. And so it's more for them than it is for me, but it's nice to see that they're in the phase of realizing they can actually achieve anything they set their mind to. And that's just honestly the first step. So that
Yes.
business gave me a life I always dreamed of. And it was a good phase in my life where I was sitting there. I'm like, I'm in ecstasy. I have everything I want, everything I've ever dreamed of. I had a superhero physique, a body, because I was working out every day. I had the money, I had the awards, I had the status, I had the relationships I've always wanted. I felt respected, I felt loved, I felt really cool, and it was really cool. And I had a team, and I had company, and I had significance, and I had all my needs were being met. And as Tony says, and as a lot of psychology teaches, the 6 human needs, I had all my needs being met. I was growing, I was contributing. Like I would send money to people if they just asked me if I needed to help them. I was getting significance. I was a little uncertain because I was still going out and I was single and I would meet women. And so I got that my little hit there. And then I had my certainty because I knew exactly how to set my mind and fix something. And so I had everything I wanted, connection and the the starting point of my surrender experiment, without me even knowing, was getting to a place where you have everything you want externally and still feeling like something's missing. Now that starts messing with you. I mean, it's easy when you're failing in life to sit down and go, I'm going to change my life because I'm being a loser. And that was my motivation strategy. Wait until shit hits the fan, and I go, I'm going to change my life. It's really easy when your life is an obvious reflection of, I don't want this. So you know what you need to do. It's clear. But what happens when you have success and you still don't feel peace? I mean, that's a scary place to be because your mind's going to start tripping out. What's going on here? This doesn't make sense. I should be happy, right? I should feel fulfilled, right? Okay? Well, maybe we should hit a new milestone in the business. Maybe we should help more people. Maybe we should tell ourselves a new story about who we are. And that's what I found myself doing is scrambling to be someone that I thought would fix the feeling of emptiness inside to some degree. So I was really happy and grateful and euphoric and exciting and all those feelings. But that was probably the first time I realized happiness doesn't mean peace. And that's a very deep, profound realization for me that peace is a completely different thing than happiness because you can be happy but not at peace. But you
Mhm.
can never be at peace and not be happy. And that was the beginning of God was catching my eye. He was tugging me. It's like, you're in the world, you made your own little egotistical heaven, but do you want to know who you are? And that was really where it was at. What happened was, and a lot of people asked me back then, that was 2 years ago, 3 years ago now. They asked me what led you to these profound awakenings and spiritual wisdom and all this stuff. And I said, pain. Because my best year in business, I was living my dream life. That was also the most painful year of my life. I I I caught some really nasty diseases, like sicknesses that put me out of work. Like I couldn't work. My body was just going through so much. Like I had a sharp pain going through my left side of my neck so bad. I couldn't even stand to work one day. I had to literally rest just because of a cramp in my neck. So I was going through serious levels of damage, emotionally, spiritually, physically, even though my life was heaven. All right. And so that caught my eye. By the end of that year, I went through, you start going through like a dark night of the soul type thing. And everything I wanted was just stripped away. And so this is the shortest version I can give for 7 years of life. I essentially was living in the States. I overstayed a bit. I didn't think it was that serious. I ended up not being able to go back. And my entire future and my dream and everything my ego was depending on for me to get to that promised land was based on me living there in Miami, where my life was. I even shipped my car there. I'm like, yeah, I'm just gonna get a visa and stay here. I couldn't go back. So I had to leave my entire life and essentially what felt like my entire identity.
Mhm.
somewhere where I can't go. I felt like I was robbed. And that put me in a really bad spiral. And I ended up in Mexico somehow because it was the closest version of Miami. And I'm
I
sitting there
remember that.
alone.
Yeah.
I'm sitting there alone in the biggest villa I've ever lived in, spending stupid amounts of money on it with a housemaid. My business was doing great. It was our biggest year ever, and I was totally depressed. And that was when I started to turn to God. I really started to think like, God, I don't know what I'm doing here. This has to be a joke because every year I've done more, I've had more, I've become more, I've achieved more, but I'm still not at peace. Like I don't feel complete. I don't feel like I feel lost. So surrender really begins when you start realizing the first step to surrender is realizing you don't know. It's the humbleness of I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what the truth is. I don't know who I am. I don't know what's going on. And that's the only kind of a mind and a heart that God can enter into. So that was 2 years ago. That led to the spiritual awakening. That's a whole story in and of itself. Since then, what I found over the last 2.5 years or so now, or 2 years, is that life has gradually been unfolding and removing things like I call dissolving things out of my life that were just not meant, that are not aligned with who I'm meant to be, or at least what's meant for me. And it's been a very beautiful journey. About 8 months ago, 284 days today ago, I decided to start documenting every day of my life. At first, to change my life and show people how I did it, but 30 days in or 50 days in or so, I realized I don't want to make a new gimmick that I'm going to put out as a business. I just realized I'm documenting every day anyways. And now I don't have any businesses left to work on. So let me just, well, the one question really infatuated me. I got obsessed with it. The question was, what would happen if I surrendered everything? That idea really excited me. It got me excited. I got curious about what would happen in my life if I surrendered everything. Because all I've known for the last 10 years is being a guy who achieves what you set your mind to, you make it happen. Like, what would happen if I let life happen without me touching it? So it's been 280 days of a journey of documenting every day as a surrender. And it's been a magical experience. And it's got really weird. It's got mystical. It's also got beautiful. It's gone through dark times. And it's quite an experience to not try to force your life into being something. And so now the work I do is literally, quite literally, anything I'm needed for. And that just being of total surrender to anything that's required of me. Whoa, like life has brought much bigger business opportunities, business deals, things like people to my doorstep that I would have never been able to achieve as the Armin who makes everything happen. I mean, I've sat down with billionaires on Zoom talking about reforming and saving thousands of children from sex slavery. I was like, I would never, the Armin I was, who was the successful dude, he would have never, first of all, this guy would have never had a time of day for him. But also, Armin would have never gone in the door with this guy. But guess what brought Armin to that? Guess what brought me to the doorstep of this man? And many men like that, and women, and like people that were doing great things. No ego. Is the more I let go of myself, the more God had room to come in and make things unimaginably bigger than I could have ever imagined happen. So maybe this episode could be about the power of surrender because I genuinely, from actual scientific documentation and searching and researching and reflecting and analyzing, like a scientist, I've seen my life as a documenter every day. The real difference between not trying to make your life happen or force it into something versus allowing life and God to show you what's already meant for you. In other words, to sum up surrender, it's stopping chasing what you want so you can make space to see what wants you.
I think what's interesting what you said, and I appreciate this journey because there's always this, to your point, to the outside world, the founder, the CEO of this company, and on the beach and all these sorts of things. And I think you and I both know, we know a lot of successful people, and some, are at peace with what they do, and they're happy, and they're fine. But I would say, I don't know what the number is, but my gut tells me it's way more than 50% that are actually unhappy. They're sort of running this facade of what quote unquote society says is successful. And you and I talked about, in our pre podcast we didn't record, it's just this essence of intuition over intelligence. We let our intelligence say, no, this is I have this house, I have this car, we do these vacations and make this money. And that's what we're supposed to chase because we have this industrial complex that rewards it. But I
Mhm.
think the human body, the human soul, I've always said the best things in life are free.
Mm.
And so oftentimes we ignore that. And Lord knows I've ignored my intuition on things. I was telling you earlier, it's this concept of Connor Carrick, a friend of mine, said you can't outmind bad biology. And he's a professional hockey player, so his body is his business. And no matter what his mindset, he has to look after it. So I find that we're really good at looking after the external world, right? Like the money, the material possession. I find nowadays we're not looking after what's inside, where the peace comes from, where actual happiness comes from. And I think most people just ignore that intuition and they just shove it down, shove it down, shove it down. The rate of, I have a cousin that died by suicide, but the percentage of suicide among the ultra wealthy is higher than the average population.
Mm.
And it's because they don't have that peace. They have these empires, and you have to just miserable. Why is that? I think they don't surrender. They're not listening to the intuition. They're not aligned with what they're supposed to be doing. And I think the lesson here is if you're listening to this, if you're really successful and you're actually happy and at peace with what you think you have, that's cool. But know that you're probably in the minority. You might not be in the place that maybe you need or supposed to be. And I think that's the whole challenge of this surrender experience. It's experience and something that folks should realize is that's why I ask people to sit down, listen to this podcast. Don't be distracted. Sit down, think, because it's really hard to do that.
I realize I don't think anyone shoves their intuition down. It's not that we choose to not listen. I mean, ultimately, it does come down to we choose to allow something else pull us into our decision. But it's more accurate and fair to say that it's one specific thought that constantly tricks us into not following our intuition. And that thought is, what if? And
Mhm.
it's incredibly important to become so self-aware that you can catch and recognize every time the ego comes in with the what if technique. And so many times, and I documented this, so I caught myself several times in the last whatever 8 months or so I've been doing this now. So many times I came to a what if moment. And because I had the habit of reflecting every day and recording it like a podcast in my life, my ego couldn't hide behind anything because I was seeing myself every day so vividly. And I saw so clearly I'm stuck in this loop. In the loop, and I'm doing it for in my life so you guys can just, because not everyone will document every day like I am. They might not have time and so I'm doing it so hopefully I can find some realizations that we all universally go through. And here's one of them that I'm pretty sure every human being goes through, which is whenever you have an intuitive feeling, right? You're
Yeah,
like, something's wrong here or something's right here. The thought that tricks you, that the ego plays to keep you completely asleep and not
yeah,
following your true nature is, well, what if I'm wrong? What if you're wrong? What if this does work out? What if this is the thing you're supposed to do? What if this person isn't bad? What if it's just me? What if it's just my projection? What if? And here's what I've learned. And this might be a freeing piece of wisdom that I got from spirit. It's not really my wisdom, but discernment, how to discern truth versus ego. This is an incredibly important tool that's helped me in my journey that hopefully it could help you. I realized intuition never uh, persuades. It's never seducing you. God doesn't sell you an idea ever. It's only the ego that does.
yeah,
Intuition
yeah,
doesn't question anything. Only the mind does. The mind being the ego, ego being inside the mind essentially. Only the ego will ask a question like, what if you're wrong? That's a doubting question.
oh,
What
mhm,
if you're right? What if we're right? What if this works out? That's a doubting question. That is an uncertainty based question. It is implying that you don't know. And intuition is the exact opposite. Intuition is the essence of your knowing. So it becomes extremely easy to identify what you're supposed to be listening to the moment you catch the nature of what the ego sounds like, which is, well, what if this business opportunity does work? What if that person, yeah, it seems like a wrong fit client, but what if it's a good client? What if you're wrong? What if this works out? What if, what if? And that paralysis, that indecision state, the moment, if you're aware enough, you realize you're in it, ooh, right there. Don't even acknowledge the conversation. Don't even entertain the ego. Just look at it and go, nice try.
Mm.
You try to get me to overthink, to think, rethink my own intuition. Nah. And then you go back to this place of presence and you go, no thought at all. What do I feel? And you know what you feel? When you ask God to intervene, to come in, like your own true nature sitting there, there's a peace that comes over you. And so when you're making a decision through intuition, it brings you peace. When you make a decision through ego, what
Mm.
happens is it brings you a sense of emotion. Emotion and peace are different. Emotion being excitement or a little bit of anxiety, but it might be exciting to you. The anxiety, oh, what if this? It brings attachment and even brings you a sense of
Yeah.
fear a bit because you don't know. But when you're at peace, like everyone, there's so many, I've done so many hundreds of one-on-ones with people around this stuff for free, just helping out. And so I got so many reps in with the patterns of people's questions. And the most common question is like, how do I know? You know, how would I know when I'm on the right path, when I'm doing the right thing, when I'm with the right person? How do I know? They just all want to have this comfort and certainty and security of I like they're doing it right, not doing it wrong, right? It shows you something
Mm.
about humanity. I tell them like it's very simple. If you're at peace. And that's such a simple and easy way to
Mm.
know where you're at. If the decision brings you peace, it's right. If what you're thinking is bringing you peace, it's right. If where you're at in your life is bringing you peace, it's right. It's dharma. It's meant for you. It's the path.
Man.
So that's a good moment there for a discerning tool for decision making is every time you start thinking about it, not like from a place of peace, you could also think about something peacefully, like, running through the ideas of something. But the moment it
Mm.
starts turning into what if I'm wrong? What if it's a doubting thing? It's not intuition. It's not you anymore. It's just the ego playing a game with itself and it's fooled you into thinking you are it.
Yeah.
We have to wake up.
I think there's so many stories, whether it's people's. I really love that framework, Ashley. Um, I've heard you say it before, but sometimes you got to hear the same thing a few times before it actually
Yeah.
hits. You're like, I heard that before. Why does it feel different now all of a sudden? And what feels different to me now is this that piece because how many stories have we heard of either business people, people making leaps, or someone escaping a dangerous situation? It was because of their intuition.
Hmm.
I felt something was wrong. I felt that I needed to leave the room. A friend of mine, daughter, her intuition was going to blaze. She didn't question it. So she took action, said, I don't feel safe. I'm going to move quickly. She
Hmm.
avoided being abducted, 21 years old, just north of the city here. And I think there is something powerful about the intuition because I think it protects us. And we're supposed to be happy and at peace. But I think the outside world is obviously ego driven. And that's where the mind plays all these games. And I think the challenge we have as society now is I think the inside, and I don't know what your thoughts on it, but I think the intuition or the inside is much more pure, has not changed. But the outside world has completely changed. And so there's more distraction, there's more games for the mind to play with you. And I don't know if I say more power to the ego, but it almost feels harder because there are more distractions, there are more what ifs. But at the end of the day, I feel there's less change as it relates to the ego of mankind or humanity. Like we kind of know if something's right or wrong if we let it if we pay attention to it. I think that's to your point a good you feel peace when you make a call or a decision. And if you're questioning too much, God knows I'm guilty of that. it's the ego messing with you and your subconscious trying to keep you alive, fear, flight mechanisms, all that sort of psychology stuff. It's just a game. To
Yeah.
your point, I think your brain is playing.
Peace is the compass. You got to follow your peace. Got to follow what brings you peace. And rest assured, this world is not God's. It is the ego's. This world is not. It doesn't even welcome God. I mean, try to actually bring the divine nature and the loving presence of God into any corner of this world. And there's always some resistance. This world is the ego's, right? And that's why it's designed to make you forget God. In fact, the world is
Yeah.
designed to try and convince you that there's something greater than God and God's love. That is what is permeating within the soul of your nature.
Mhm.
And the truth is, there is nothing. And that's why this entire world tries so hard. The ego tries so hard and has so many layers to its skill and masterful abilities to really try to convince you to forget God and there's something greater than God. That is your true nature, which is there's something greater than your own true nature. It's like, what? That doesn't make any sense.
Mhm.
So the world is the ego's, but humanity is God's. And so that's how I've come to see it is that we as people are one with God and God is everything. So we still belong to God, but the world of illusion, of media, of things, which is ran by people, but I'm saying those who are totally, completely lost and possessed by their own egos of the mind, they develop the world where the world belongs to the ego, but we, the people, are still belonging to God. And that's kind of the spiritual battle, the spiritual warfare
Mhm.
we're in, is remembering who we are, which is the divine nature and the essence of spirit and eternal spirit in God, in a world that's only designed to show you everything that's a lie, that's false and opposite, or trickery close to what you think you are, but not the actual
Mhm.
thing. And so the feeling of God, in a religious sense, for example, is almost trickingly in your mind, the same thing as God Himself. It's still not God. And that's a whole nother layer of deception. Is the people who really believe they know God, but all they know is the passion of their own emotions that throws them into a hallucination of inspiration that they think is from God, but it's really just their own ego making up their own things. And it's like real knowing God as a peace in the core of your spirit and yourself. That requires a total stillness, total surrender.
Total still.
And this world is designed not to make you do any of those things. It's designed to keep you thinking that life should be about continuously and unlimitedly satisfying all your desires and cravings. That's what life is. A good life is getting everything you want. And one time I was meditating and I was seeing my mind so masterfully, right? It's trying so hard to convince me to just forget God. And I really saw it. I'm like, meditate, I'm going to stillness. And my mind and all these cravings came up, all these desires and impulses, sex impulse, food impulse, like all these things came up in me. And I started seeing my mind. And I'm like, look at this trying so hard to convince me, to sell me the ultimate package of pleasure for me to forget the peace that of God of knowing his love in me. And I think of like, that Christ, the story where he's fasting 40 days in the forest and the devil comes, it's like, I'll give you the whole world. It's like kind of that metaphor.
Mhm.
And you know what I
Yeah.
did? I danced with this mind. I said, okay, let's go to the ends in my imagination. I'm going to go to the ends of everything you could ever give me, and let's see what we find there. So I started imagining, deliberately, consciously imagined having all the women I could ever want. Like I tried to maximize the scene in my mind of like what's breaking the scale of pleasure.
Yeah.
I
What's the
thought of
extreme end of it?
what's the extreme ultimate, and I put all the women I could ever imagine. I could put all the favorite foods I can ever eat with the appetite that I can eat all of it. Games I've loved to play, like everything I could imagine. And I'm in a Greek God physics, so I even look great and I feel great. Like I put everything in it. You know, you can imagine that
Yeah.
palace I was living in that imagination. Just a total orgy, buffet. Like it's like
Yeah.
I
The
took
whole
the human
craziness.
desire all the way to the ends of the earth that this ego can give me. You know what I found? I'm sitting there in this humorous like spirit in me. I'm like, still, the power of that temptation is only in the distance when you think you want it. But I went all the way
Yeah.
to the end of it, and all I felt was disgusted. I actually got to
Mhm.
the end of it, and I felt disgusted, disconnected, depleted,
Yeah.
and just terrible. Worse than I could have ever felt. And I caught the ego in its master disguise. I caught it, and it didn't know. It's like the scene in the movie. Keanu Reeves plays the Buddha in the Little Buddha, and there's a scene in
Mhm.
that movie where he's sitting there, and there's a mirror reflection of him sitting in front of him, the Buddha, and he looks at him, and he looks at himself, that reflection of him, and he goes, "O Lord of my own ego, I now see you. You are pure illusion." And his ego goes, "I am you. I am you."
Mhm.
And he goes, "You're pure illusion." And then him transforms into this ugly looking man sitting in front of him because the ego got like lost his disguise and he just faded
Yeah.
away. And I think of that scene, I go, that's what meditation is. That's what facing your mind is. I sat there and I'm like, I see you, my ego, and I know you're pure illusion. So all those desires that was tempting me, I broke the scale with them. I'm like, still, it's nothing compared to the peace of knowing God in my heart and to just be still.
Mhm.
And all of this, you make me think I want it, but actually, I would feel terrible getting all of it. It's not what I really want. So I saw the master deception, which is trying to sell you the closest thing to the actual thing. And that's what this world is designed to do, is to take you 999 steps towards God, towards peace, towards the fulfillment of love inside you, but then say, don't go to the 1,000th step, which is where the actual thing is. Just stay with me. Stay with me in this world.
Just stay back. Yeah.
Right before the actual promise. Stay here. I got the secondhand version, artificial version of everything God is right here. And now you can understand why ego is winning in the battle of mathematically of how many people know God versus are completely
You
sleepwalking in
don't.
life. So
I think
it's
when
having
the
compassion is
tricks.
important because you're against a worthy universal opponent. I mean, we are up against the greatest villain you could ever have. And like think of movies times a million. Like that
Sure.
opponent of you inside, that spiritual entity, whatever that ego is, it's a worthy opponent, man. But the peaceful realization is your true essence and nature of what you are. Just remembering it completely disperses the shadow of an ego in any room. It's like you are not even greater than the ego. You are real and it is not. And that should be the peaceful knowing.
The one sort of tool that I would extract from what you said, and something I could learn from, I play it out in my mind, but not to the extent that you just talked about. And I think that's something really important for the audience is like, we've heard multiple people talk, well, what would your 80-year-old self say?
Mm.
Um, but I think what you talk about is, let's, let's play with this, if you will. Sort of sit down and say, okay, I want X and go to the extremes. Is that whatever the extreme of that X is, like you talked about, all the different pleasures. And if someone got something that you're thinking about right now, okay, play that out. Play it out 50 years, play it out in the most intense possible extreme way, like you just did,
Mhm.
and see how you come out. In
Well,
all
if you do,
likelihood,
well,
you'll
if you
come
do it
out
with
like you felt.
goals, well, if you do it with goals, there's a chance you might actually believe. Like people do this visualization all the time.
Yeah.
If you do it with goals, there's a chance you might actually believe there's a greater life than the one you're living. And that's another deception. I think this specific exercise works only because I broke the scale with all of my impulses, my cravings. Cravings are very different than goals. If you
Yeah.
try to do this
Fair
with
point. Fair point.
if you try to do this with like your vision in life, you might get yourself really excited and wanting to work towards some non-existent future of a life that you think is better than the one you're at, which is the ultimate lie because you're believing somewhere else is better than here. And here is the only thing that exists. And anything
Yeah.
that pulls you out of being here now is the ego at play. So I even visualization, I stopped. I haven't asked God for or prayed, visualized, meditated on anything for like 8 months now. I mean, it's 7 months now. I have not genuinely wanted something in my life that isn't already here. And that alone has been a whole dimension of peace that's opened up for me because it's very exhausting to constantly be living in the pursuit of somewhere is better than here, someone is better than me now, that is better than this. It's like the ego only exists in everywhere but here. So just being able, like if you just did this one thing, this would change your entire life. Just getting really good at being here. If you just got really good at just being here now, you don't even need to know how all the other stuff is working. It will fall into place for you. So for cravings, that was a good exercise. For goals, you have to kind of not like
You have
not
to be careful.
entertain. You got to not entertain the visualizing of a life where you think would be better than that because you'll believe it. I mean, that's literally what the entire success industry of entrepreneurship is.
It's all built.
Believing there's a better life out there that you're not living, in which that means you start now from an ultimate lie that you are in a lacking place and it's not greater than like better doesn't exist, not in the way you
Yeah.
think. And that's the ultimate lie. And so it's I want to say it's sad, but it's perfect in the design of the balance of how things are. But yeah, there's entire industries that are designed unconsciously, and they don't really, I don't think they know it, that are teaching people to really believe there's a better life for you. So then you shouldn't be happy with where you're at. And that those people create that creates the most depressed people in the world. But worse, the worst people than that are
True.
the ones who actually do achieve that better life they thought, because they actually believe they got somewhere. Now they're really deep into the illusion that somewhere else is better than here. So if that was me, like I got really addicted to the idea that life is better some way else. And so I never really considered where I am is where I need to be. I just always thought where I want to be is where better than where I am. And that's a complete deception and illusion. It's a hallucination. You have to quiet this mind to start seeing truth. That's not truth.
You made a really good point there because I went the classical route, which was goals and this vision thing, versus maybe dealing with cravings or some other stuff. I think that's an important delineation. You also ring very true with there's a pot, and I talked about this a few about 15 podcast episodes ago. Sean Acker talks about the art of happiness. Um, People are unhappy because you said it just perfectly, is that you're here and there's this thing over there. But the society and the ego always push happiness on the other side of the attainment of the thing. So
Yeah.
you're always moving forward with this gap, creating all sorts of angst. To your point, which is something that you experienced. Well, I'll be happy if one trick, and I don't know if you have any statements in your mind, but the one thing I've caught myself trying to do is I'll be happy when I have this job. I'll be happy when I have this car. I'll be happy when, because it automatically creates tension in the present and that the present sucks. The present doesn't suck because it's what is real. It's what you're here, you're alive. We're like, there's so much blessing just to be present. There's a movie called Be Here Now. It's about the story of his name is Andy. I forgot his last name in the movie called Spartacus. And the documentary is called Be Here Now because he got cancer really young. He was in the episode of Spartacus. Just very moving story. And I actually have his leather band in my car. And it's I should have brought it. Maybe in the next podcast I'll show you. But the very words
Can you
are
send that to me? It's not from Ram Dass. It's not the Be Here Now Ram Dass documentary.
no, no, it's Andy. I think it's Andy Whitfield, the Australian actor that was in Spartacus.
Never heard of it. I'd love
And
to
and
see
I
it. Send
have
it
the
over.
leather at the leather thing because he was the Spartacus, right? He was gladiator, so they wore leather, and I have it in my car. And for me, it's to realize because what I have found since earlier on, I always try to live in this. Sometimes that's my problem. I live in the future, right? But maybe it's okay to live there. It's like, okay, all right, well, I got to come back, right? It's like, all
It's
right,
our problem. Don't worry, Dave.
yeah,
It's
yeah, it's
our
a
problem.
collective sort of societal problem, but that's something that I have as a reminder. It's a leather strap, and it says "Be here now," and that's the title of the movie by Andy Whitfield, and that's the problem, right? Because, like I said, I've been through so much tragedy in my life. Like, I don't know what the future holds, but I know what I can do right now. Like, I'm here, I'm having a conversation with someone I respect, having something good. Guess what? I'm at peace, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm good. Like, it's a good place
Most
to be when you find yourself in those moments. It's
most
a
people,
great
when we
place
say
to be.
present, is they're thinking of their present life situation. But when we talk about present, we're talking about being in your body in this room right now. We're talking about a quiet mind, no thoughts. Just silencing your thoughts alone would change your life. Um, and there is no such thing as living in the future or living in the past. Those are hallucinations, and it's important we
Yeah.
have to start to discern things with accurate language so that we can actually know what the true nature of it is. Living in the future is not in and of itself is a contradiction. You can't live. Life only happens
Yeah.
where it's living, and it's living in this moment in existence.
Right now. Yeah.
Right. So there is no living in
Fair
the future.
point. Yeah.
It's an idea in the mind that these are the kind of delusions we need to start shedding light over if we're going to become awake. As a species. Um, you can only be here now and hallucinate about the future or the past. So when we say present, we're talking about not thinking. It's not about what
Hmm.
you're thinking, it's about not thinking.
Yeah.
Being has nothing to do with thought. It's a cool meditation technique I can share with you guys is sit in meditation, right? Become still, erect your spine, and then kind of imagine, step outside yourself, watching yourself sit there, meditate, and meditate on the meditator. Just meditating on the idea of who is this person meditating? This
Mm.
person being you sitting there. And what you'll find happens is you start thinking about the thinker thinking thoughts. Instead of thinking thoughts, you're sitting there, you're thinking about thoughts. You start to think about the thinker thinking thoughts. Like, what kind of person is thinking these thoughts? So if you're having all these thoughts of worry, you step outside yourself and you start to analyze. You start to become aware about who is the kind of person I'm being to think these thoughts, which means you're thinking on the thinker, meditating on the meditator. And suddenly
Interesting thought.
the contents of your thoughts don't mean anything. It doesn't matter anymore what you're thinking. What matters is who you're being as you're thinking. You almost meditate on the beingness of where you're at. So you start seeing your spiritual DNA, not just your spiritual state, not just your mental state. And you start realizing, but like, look, this is a person that's really worried. So you start to see them in a zoomed out kind of different dimension. Instead of this, I'm worried, you step out and go, this is a person who's worried, thinking worrying thoughts. Maybe you want to go really deep. Then you step behind the guy who's meditating on the meditator, and you meditate on the awareness that is aware
Mm.
of the meditator meditating. And so it's like if you keep doing this, you'll eventually, it feels like you're going through the back doors until you reach the seat of the supreme awareness. And that's where God's sitting with you. And you're just watching all these layers. It feels like what I felt like was when I do this is I'm in a bubble of my mind and I step outside the mind bubble. And suddenly I'm seeing
Hmm.
the brilliance of the mind at work in front of me. This mind, look at all the different layers of delusion, of selves and identities, of it believing things are what it is, of realities. I'm outside this whole mind bubble and I'm seeing the mind from outside as the awareness. I'm like, wow, look at that. Look how brilliant this whole system is, like 15 layers of selves watching itself, thinking it's actually what it is. And it's like, you really think you're sitting there right now. You really think you're thinking that. You really think that's you. None of it is. You're the awareness of all of those selves. You're not the self itself. That's why kind of like self realization is like, I'm coining this term. It's like unselfing. I might turn it to something later, but it's like unselfing. It's like the path to knowing God is unselfing. It's letting go of self, every layer of it.
Yeah, it's
And
interesting.
very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that term, unselfing. Never heard of it. I, as you kind of talked about that, meditate on the meditator behind. Like that kind of hurts the head in a bit because it's not. It just feels so powerful, but it seems like it's something you need practice. It probably doesn't come to us naturally, or maybe
That
it
is
does.
your
We just
natural
don't know.
natural state. But when you're deep into illusion, there is a sense of dissonance, like a withdrawal symptom when you're pulling out of the mind. So
Mhm.
again, I keep stressing this, like be gentle with yourself, be compassionate, take it slow, go at your own pace. There's no rush, anyways. Waking up from the dream of being who you are, right? Which is it's really just a dream. You think you think you are who you think you are. That's a dream. Waking up from a dream doesn't have to be rushed. There's no finish line. There's no wrong or right way to do it. It's just waking up is however you end up waking up. Do it gently because it is quite a delicate process. And again, these are all realizations from documenting every day, watching myself doing it. And it's like, gotta be gentle, man. Like this is not a game, a race. It's more like a gentle hug from God. And so when you're waking up from a dream and it's a bad one, or one that you're really convinced is real, you're going to be a little startled when you wake up, right? And so, and even the
Mhm.
process of waking up, you think you're losing your mind, but like you are and you're not. You're losing your mind, not you. And because you think you are the mind, when you're losing your mind, you think you're losing you.
Yeah,
And so you think you're dying. But if you think of it that way, then death really is the exit door out of illusion. So because the mind's convinced that death is the ending of self, well, then it's true. It is. And when the ending of self is the beginning of soul.
deep. But I think it's important because I, so many people aren't. Almost nobody I know thinks in these thought patterns or spiritual senses or this sort of essence of being. But yet, so many people have the temporal problems of quote unquote unhappiness, lack of peace, right? Like everyone chasing. And you and I were talking earlier about, I did my exec MBA, and I that's why I wanted this conversation. Why, what are the reasons that businesses or people fail, right? They don't get the strategy, structure, but then there's this whole people essence to it. And it's really complex, right? They even said Einstein, the smartest man alive ever, supposedly, his IQ, his brain was only using 13% the power of the mind. And I actually think it was one of the books, it's one of my favorite books, Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, in my grade 13 book. Yes, I went to school and there was a grade 13 in this province. It was The Mind of Man Can Believe. Yeah, there was once upon a time. Called OAC. And my going away thing was what the mind of man can believe and achieve, can achieve, which is a quote from Napoleon Hill. And that was literally in my grade 13 book because I just love that essence. I've always been fascinated with like in life and in business, this essence of like, well, it's actually peace, but we call it happiness, right? But and why is there this dissonance in people's lives and people's roles and all that sort of stuff? And I think what you opened up with is this, for whatever reason, they're living or chasing these illusions and they're ignoring about what I'm doing. Is it giving me peace? We're not all meant to do the same thing. We're not. We all have different skills and desires. But the question is, we all have different states of what's peaceful to me. To
Yeah,
your point,
that's a
you know,
really important question, actually. Defining peace. I mean, I
what
remember
is
sitting in,
peace?
yeah, whew, that's a whole nother. Um, I remember sitting in a sauna with this young, driven entrepreneur guy in Colombia, just like a month and a half ago before I left. Or, yeah. And I'm talking about surrender and peace. And he goes, not everyone wants peace. This is my first time hearing something like that. Who would say such a thing? It's like saying not everyone wants to be healthy. It's like, what, really? I mean, in today's world, they're even trying to confuse those things too. I mean, so he's standing there, he's like, not everyone wants peace. I'm like, interesting. Again, I'm very open. Like I keep myself open. It's the nature of a seeker. And so I'm like, can you tell me what you mean? He goes, well, you see, I don't want peace right now in my life because I'm successful and I'm afraid my peace will lower my drive. And I'm like, wow. Thank you for saying that. You gave me a whole nother world of misunderstanding that I didn't even consider that the humanity could have about peace. So I looked at him, I go, it sounds like you don't know what peace is. He goes, well, what's peace to you? I go, well, first of all, just to clear up something, a peaceful mind is the most productive mind. I think you're
No
thinking when
question.
I say peace, I think you're thinking I mean relaxed. And relaxed and peace are not the same thing. I said, let me ask you a question, man. If you're sitting at dinner and you get some terrible news and your stomach's churning, your mind's disturbed, can you eat your dinner? Can you even enjoy your dinner, let alone eat it? He goes, well, no, I'd probably lose my appetite. Okay. So you see, without peace, you can't even eat dinner. Even that you can't achieve. And you
A most
think
basic need.
most basic need, you can't even do that with because your mind's disturbed. And you're telling me you're worried peace is going to stop your drive in life? So, so it's just a misunderstanding here. You don't know what peace is. You think I mean relaxed, lazy, doing nothing. And that's honestly, it's a huge portion of the world that just doesn't even consider the word peace in their language because they think that. And I
They think
actually
it
was one of
means
those people. I remember
mhm.
one of the first sales jobs I got where I had a mentor. And the guy's like, I'm like, I want to really hit new heights here. What do I do? He goes, read the book, The Power of the Now. I'm like, no. He goes, why? I go, that book's about spirituality and like letting go, right? Like being here now. I don't want to be here. I want to be motivated. And he's like, you have so much to learn. And I remember at that time, I'm like, I don't want to read The Power of Now. That's gonna kill my drive. So I
You were
understand.
that guy.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and funny enough, later I realized like, yeah, I was very wrong about that. So it's important to know what peace is. See, peace is not happiness. Well, first let's define happiness because most people say they want to be happy, but what they really mean is they want to be at peace. So happiness is like an
Sure.
itch. Okay, when you have an itch, you
Gap.
see
It's
you're scratching it.
there's a gap, something. Yeah.
So you have an itch somewhere, right? And you want to scratch it. So you scratch it. What do you usually feel when you scratch an itch? It's relief.
Momentary relief.
Yeah, you have this relief. So most people, happiness, when they say I want a happiness, what they really just mean is I want to be relieved of something bothering me. I mean, it's a quite sad but true definition of happiness. Happiness is just relieving yourself of something bothering you. And you go, well, no, it's not that. So I'm not bothered. Well, really, next time you have an itch, try not scratching it. Tell me how peaceful you are. You're going to be bothered, man. You're going to want to scratch that itch, okay?
Yeah.
So here's the problem with happiness itching, right? Once I scratch one, is it over? You're like, now it's over. I'm complete. No, you're gonna have seven more full. You're just scratching everywhere. Now you're rubbing yourself against the wall. Now, if you walked across me on a street and I'm sitting there scratching myself like this, would you think I'm a healthy person? Would you think that guy's
No,
successful?
no.
He's got it. But I'm scratching all my itches more than you, so I'm getting much more happy than you, aren't I? So do I look like a healthy, successful person? No, it looks like I'm on something or I've taken something, right? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Something's wrong. So
Something's
this
out
is
of
how
whack.
I see the world now. Is everyone chasing happiness? They look sick. That's all it is to me. I'm saying they're
Sure.
trying to itch it. Everyone just bothered because they don't have something they want or they have something they don't want. I'm gonna say that again. Everyone just bothered because they don't have something they want or they have something they don't want. In other
One
words,
or
they
the
have an
other.
itch they can't either reach to
Yeah.
scratch or they have an itch that they keep scratching and it's leaving a rash because it keeps itching because they need it.
Keeps
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
So happiness is just this. It's something other than here's better. So happiness isn't peace.
Sweet.
Now, let's say we go play a game of golf. Just an example. And I say, hey man, let's go play a game of golf. We'll play. If I win, I win. If you win, you win. Nothing happens. Just good job. If you lose, I want to kill your whole family. You ready to play? You go, hold on a second. What the hell are you talking about? Yeah, yeah, yeah. We got people there at your house right now. You lose this game, it's over. I mean, Squid Game's kind of stuff, right? And you go, I don't want to play this game. But like, no, you have to. Now that you're here, you have to play the game. Now, let me ask you a question. Are you going to play the best game of your life now? A lot of people, I really sit on this. A lot of people go, of course, I need to save my family. I go, but are you going to play your best? Think about it for a moment, especially in a game of golf where it's all about relaxation, your mind
But
being clear.
yeah,
You're going to be so stressed about the outcome, so stressed. You're going to play like shit. Because every time you sit there, every moment that passes by, you're stressing and fearing and dreading. What if I lose, right?
yeah, the what
Even if you
if.
win the game, you'll be traumatized. You'll never want to play the game again. You'll regret playing it in the first place. So, this is how happiness is. Even if you get what you want, you're not happier. You're not better off. You're worse off. Because even having it now, you're worried about losing it. And it burns you out to get it. I was the guy. You don't
Yeah.
even enjoy your life and you're not enjoying where you're at because of what it costed to get there. See, you were in stress the whole game. Now, let's say I flip the script. Now, let's say we go to a golf course. I said, let's go play a game, man. I'm like, if you lose, nothing happens. You're fine. If you win, I'm gonna wire you $10,000. Just to help me, just for playing with me. And you go, really? I'm like, yeah. You know what? Even if you lose, I'll wire you $10,000. I'll just wire you $10,000. Let's just play the game. And you go, okay. Now let me ask you a question. Are you gonna play the best game ever? Some people would actually misunderstand and go, well, no, I'd be lazy and I wouldn't care. This is how the ego's completely tricked us. See, you're gonna play the best game ever. Why? Because you're totally at peace. You don't give a shit.
Yeah.
You don't care what happens.
Nothing.
Whether you win
Yeah.
or lose, the reward is still yours. And so what happens is an interesting phenomenon. You don't start the game as a loser that needs to win. You start the game as a winner already. And you play as a winner. You don't play as a loser that needs to win, which is what happens when you're
Mm.
attached to the outcome. You start the game as a loser.
As a loser.
But when
I
you
love that
already
analogy.
when you already have the prize, you start playing as a winner. Now, here's the cool thing. You start playing this game of golf, and maybe you're not even good at it, but because you're so stress-free and so free and open and you're just having fun, you're going to start trying trick shots. You're going to play better than you even imagined you could play. You start doing weird stuff that actually works really well because you're totally relaxed and nothing's bothering you. This is a game that you play in peace. So the difference between peace and happiness is
Mm.
happiness is having an itch you need to scratch, and it's completely robbing you of the power of your own presence and the moment and clarity. Peace is you have an itch, but you don't need to scratch it. Doesn't matter. And real peace, when you start exercising meditation and quieting the mind, is you have no itches left. Now, some people hear that and they go, Roman, what goals will I have if I have no itches? That means I have no goals, no desires, no nothing. I'm not going to live anymore. I go, no, it's the opposite. You're actually going to start to live because you weren't
Mm-hmm.
even playing the game because every moment when you're dreading the outcome, you can't eat the dinner if you have to take a piss. Right? If you're sitting
Yeah.
at dinner and you have to take a piss, you're going to be fantasizing about a toilet because you've got to be somewhere else other than here. So you run to the toilet to piss. So then just like this, you piss away your life. You're always
Yeah.
anxious to get to the next thing. Peace is the only way you actually create beautiful results. It's the most productive way to be. Peace is not happiness. Peace is, I don't need anything. I don't need to win.
Mm.
I don't need to lose. I don't need you. I don't need this. I don't need that. I need nothing is the state of peace. If you were to actually put a voice to peace versus happiness, peace would say, I need nothing. Happiness would say, I need something. It's quite the opposite.
Quite.
Ego always says, I need. The soul always says, I am. It's the difference, the clear difference. And so when this guy said, not everyone wants peace, I'm like, no, you're wrong. Everybody is peace, only wants peace, but they have been completely delusioned by the mind, misinterpreting and misdefining things. You have no life if you don't have peace. You're essentially living in a
Sure.
constant state of anxiety and trying to scratch itches that are bothering you. That's no life, man. That's no life. It doesn't matter if you scratch everything. And I have. And I still realized I'm not any better off. I just have a momentary sense of relief that is going to end soon. It's like, that is no way to live your life. But that's what this whole world's designed to convince you. Your whole life is about scratching every itch you have, and that's a successful, happy life. You'll be so complete if you just keep scratching all your itches. And guess what? The more you
Hmm.
scratch your itches, we're going to give you more itches to scratch. And that's the world, man. That's the world of
Yeah.
product sales to you. That's the world of programming you, entertainment. Everyone's just trying to make you continuously have itches to scratch and to continuously motivate you to scratch your itches.
That it sound the way you put that, and we'll end on that story because I gotta go think about this. It's just so powerful because I think it's so obvious when you say it. And this is why I wanted to do this podcast to put this out there to share with people because the essence that you're playing, play as a winner. And what does that mean? You got to be at peace. What does that mean? And you kind of just keep dialing your questions back to see. And I used to think, yeah, this whole essence of happiness and get moved. I think the word, maybe the place in between the two might be fulfillment. Fulfillment's a little closer to peace than what happiness is, because as you were explaining, they're actually on opposite ends.
Yeah,
Um,
fulfillment is peace.
Fulfillment,
Fulfillment
yeah,
is that feeling of completion.
yeah,
That's the state of, that's the beingness of peace. It's that there is nothing
hmm,
left. I am all. I am whole. I'm
yeah,
fulfilled. Even
complete.
chasing fulfillment, the way the entrepreneurial world talks about it now, they're just saying happiness. They're just using the word
It's
fulfillment
just,
because, and I don't want to be honest, it's only because Tony Robbins says it, and he's like the guy that everyone knows, and so
of course,
he's programmed everyone with the language of the science of achievement and the art of fulfillment. So he's made a game like a framework out of it. So again, the mind's taken this, conceptualized it, and made it something artificially instead of embracing, embodying the wisdom of what real fulfillment is. They just have it as a mental concept. It's like art of fulfillment. So those people will go,
yeah,
there's the science of success, which is I got to do all these things to be successful. And they'll be like, and then I also do all these other things to help people because art of fulfillment is about spending time with family and do this. It's like, it's not a mechanical thing. You can't.
no,
Fulfillment isn't a checklist, which is what an
no, exactly,
egoic mind, right, is
yeah,
trying to
yeah,
control fulfillment. Fulfillment is the byproduct of when you know God, when you know who you are, in your mind and your heart is at
when
peace.
you're really there,
That's it. And so
yeah,
fulfillment is a place you should work from, not work to.
to, yeah, because you're playing from a place of abundance versus this essence of lack. I think that's really important. I think we all have that abundance. I think we have to think and find it. It's there. I think it's about what you said about discerning. That's a conversation that's not typically had, that you're not typically thinking about it. It's like, oh, I'll be happy when I hit a six revenue month. I'll be happy when, and it doesn't lead to peace.
Yeah.
And there's so many examples of it. And thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for documenting it. We'll have you back on this podcast to go deeper in a couple other angles. I will put the links to where people can find you. So I'll put that in the show notes. I just really wanted to thank you for your time, having such a deep, powerful conversation. This has more power to change people than how to do a strategy template or how to close, because that's a different world. I think we're humans. There's something unique about us, and this is what's unique about us, right? We have the intellect, the awareness, whatever we want to call it, of what true peace is. And thank you for shedding light on that concept. I can't wait to do the notes on this thing. Any closing thoughts, my friend?
You are the peace that you're looking for. So remember who you are.
Amen. I appreciate that. And I
Amen.
think that's great, great advice. Thank you all today. I hope you enjoyed today's podcast. All the information to connect with either of us will be in the show note. Until next time, thank you for your time and attention. Much appreciated. God bless.